Hello dear students. Today we are going to learn about the development of face and palate. Face develops from the pharyngeal arches, and these pharyngeal arches are the structures found parallel to the pharynx in the developing fetus, and these pharyngeal arches starts to appear around the 22 day of gestation. Humans have five pair of pharyngeal arches: pair 1, pair 2, pair 3, pair 4, pair 6. The fifth pair is missing because that pair disappears. These pharyngeal arches are the structures composed of outer layer of ectoderm, inner layer of endoderm, and between these two layers there is a mesenchyme which derived from the lateral plate mesoderm and paraxial mesoderm, and it also contains ectomesenchyme which is derived from the neural crest cells. This mesenchyme also contains cartilage, aortic arch artery, and the third thing is arch associated cranial nerve. When we look at these pharyngeal arches from the sides or lateral view, then we found outer part in the outer part these pharyngeal arches are separated from each other with the help of clefts or grooves. These clefts are lie externally and lined by the ectoderm. However, from inside, these pharyngeal arches are separated with the structure known as pouches. These pouches are lie internally and are lined by the endoderm. Now, this is the developing fetus around the week 4. It is showing that here is the development of pharyngeal arches started, and the first pharyngeal arch initially only have one single formation, but gradually it divides into two parts. First is the maxillary, and second is mandibular. From these maxillary and mandibular arches, the maxilla and mandible develops, and from here this portion hangs over the arches and surrounds the this oropharyngeal membrane, which is also known as stomodeum. So from above, this frontonasal process hangs over the stomodeum, and from the lateral sides, these maxillary processes encroaches over the stomodeum, and from the inferior side, the mandibular processes encroaches over the stomodeum. This frontonasal forms the future mid portion of nose, upper lip philtrum, and the maxillary processes forms the upper lip and the maxilla. Mandibular part forms the lower jaw and the lower lip. Now this is the fetus around the 6 week of gestation. This is the frontonasal process which hangs down, and then it uh, divide it then it divides into two parts, the medial nasal process and lateral nasal process. This pink one is lateral nasal process and this green one is medial nasal process. Now these processes surrounds the structure which is known as nasal pit. Initially there is no pit, so it is known as placode, but gradually a pit form which is then known as nasal pit. These medial and lateral nasal processes then come in contact with the maxillary prominence, and then from inferior side these mandibular prominences comes. Gradually what happens that this medial nasal process enlarges and outgrows the growth of the lateral nasal processes, and then this medial nasal process fuse with the maxillary process or maxillary prominences to form the upper lip. These lateral nasal processes forms the lateral wall of the nose, and this mandibular processes prominences grows to form lower jaw. This is how the lateral part of the nose formed from the lateral nasal process, and medial part is formed from the medial nasal process, and philtrum, that is the mid portion of upper lip, is formed from the medial nasal process. Any defect in the fusion of uh, maxillary prominences with the medial nasal process leads to cleft lip. So this is important that defective fusion of maxillary and medial nasal process forms a cleft lip. Cleft lip can be unilateral or bilateral. This development of the face is tightly regulated with the at molecular level with the help of SHH, that is sonic hedgehog gene, FGF gene, BMP4 gene, and WNT gene signaling. By the end of 7th week, the face assumes a distinctly human configuration with nasal, oral, ocular structures aligned. In this structure, around 7th week, we can see these are the uh, optic placodes. This is the nasal pit, and this is the mouth, future mouth. This future mouth initially is oropharyngeal membrane. As we have seen previously in our previous lectures, embryonic disc in the cranial portion has a membrane which is known as oropharyngeal membrane, and at the caudal end there is primitive streak and primitive node and a cloacal membrane. These two sites, cloacal membrane and the oropharyngeal membranes, are the two sites where the ectoderm and endoderm are in direct contact with each other with no intervening mesoderm lying between them. As the development of face progresses, this stomodeum or oropharyngeal membrane breaks down and leads to canalization of external mouth to come in contact with the pharynx. Now come to the development of palate. Palate is the roof of the mouth. It separates the nasal cavity from the mouth. The palate is of two types or has two parts. One is the hard palate. This is hard bony palate, and the posterior part is soft palate. Soft palate has uvula and the uvular arches. The hard palate forms in the two stages. First is the primary palate and then the secondary palate forms. The primary palate forms from the intermaxillary segment, which is formed by the fusion of medial nasal processes. And this primary palate has the site for the attachment of the four upper incisor teeth. It is a triangular portion, and this is the primary palate, and these portions which are formed from the or arise from the maxillary prominences form the secondary palate. At the fusion of these three structures, the triangular primary palate and the secondary palate, uh, this foramen remains, and this is known as the incisive foramen. What passes through the incisive foramen is the nasopalatine nerve, providing sensation to the oral mucosa as well as blood vessels like terminal ends of greater palatine vessels and branches of the sphenopalatine artery. Greater palatine vessels and branches of sphenopalatine artery. These lateral shelves, which are outgrowth of the maxillary prominences on either side, initially grows vertically alongside the tongue, but by the 7th to 8th week of gestation, they elevate to a horizontal position above the tongue and begins to grow medially toward each other. And then the fusion of palatal shells occur in the midline, forming the definitive secondary palate. And then this fusion of the palate occur, and this secondary palate form, and this palate is the secondary palate, and this fuses with the primary palate. This is the secondary palate. And this is the primary palate. Fusion of the palatal shelves occur in the midline, forming the secondary palate, and then it proceeds anteriorly to fuse with the primary palate and superiorly with the nasal septum. This is a very coordinated fusion process and mediated by the many molecular signals such as TGF beta 3, SHH, that is sonic hedgehog, BMP4, and MSX1. Defective fusion of the secondary palates. If there is defective fusion of the both secondary lateral shelves of the secondary palate occur, then the posterior defect occur, which is known as posterior cleft palate or U-shaped cleft palate. The complete fusion of the primary and secondary palates forms the hard and soft palate, with the soft palate extending posteriorly to include the uvula and the muscular structures. Disruption of this process due to genetic mutations like MSX1 mutation, TBX22 mutations, or environmental teratogens like alcohol anticonvulsants can result in cleft palate, which may occur in isolation or as a part of syndrome such as Pierre-Robin sequence or Treacher-Collins syndrome. The successful formation of palate is essential for normal speech, feeding, and separation of the respiratory and digestive tracts. Now let's learn about the cleft palate. Cleft palate occurs when there is any defective fusion between these uh, three structures, the one primary and the two secondary palate forming structures. These are the lateral shelves and this is the premaxilla and lateral shelf. These two are lateral shelves. So any defect in the fusion between these two structures and these two structures causes the cleft palate. If it occurs in the unilateral side, then it is unilateral cleft palate, and if it occurs on both sides, then it is bilateral cleft palate. If it occurs in both primary as well as in secondary palate fusion, then it is complete cleft palate, and if it occurs only in the secondary palate fusion, then it is the incomplete cleft palate. So that was all for today. Thank you.